we're talking about some of the framework of how do we set up our evaluating and understanding of information. And this is a good place to start. And you'll notice that what we talked about last week, we start with observation, right? It's hard to come up with a hypothesis if we haven't observed something. So observation is first, right? And so we're going to notice and name some of the things that we see going on that we might want to address or change. And that's where we start with critical thinking. So from there, we're going to analyze it. So we're going to ask good questions. We're going to continue gathering more information and making more observations. Just because we moved into analysis doesn't mean that we have to stop observing. We may get halfway through the observation process and realize there's 3 things we missed while we were developing our analysis and we want to add them in. So you can go back and forth between these steps as many times as you need to before moving on to the next step, or you can get through the entire process and realize you need to start over and do it again. There's no like finiteness to this process. It's ongoing. And you do this. Most people do this anyway, to some degree, in some way, when they make decisions, no matter what. But it can be useful to come back to the principles of how to analyze and use inference to draw at least as solid and concrete fact-based conclusions as possible. Because the better the data you gather and the more concrete the data you gather, the easier it is to draw conclusions from that. Yeah. So as we move through and we analyze, and we understand and interpret all of the data that we're getting, then we can start to draw some conclusions or make some assumptions or hypotheses or come up with some working ideas about what we might want to do or need to do. And then it's always a good idea to check these things with others, right? So sometimes you don't have that option, and that's fine. You can move through this phase if you want to relatively quickly, but you should be communicating with yourself accurately and trying to really check yourself by writing things out, right? This is a great step for journaling or for finding something else to track so that you're setting up your next series of data points that you can refer back to. And then we're going to try to implement a solution. So this is where the problem solving process begins. And we start to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I've done the observation. I've kind of crunched the numbers and figured it out. Now I'm going to take this next step. So last week we went through a couple of things Liz was worrying about.
My biggest thing was I use these vision boards on my wall, and I like to surround myself with images of bodies that I want to look like. And in my head, I think this is great because, you know, the more you look at these type of bodies, the more you're going to work to get that kind of body. And even if you don't get all the way there, it'll at least help you. I found that I really don't think that's working at all. And in fact, I think it is probably a pretty good way to shame yourself every day, depending on the kind of person you are. I think most people would use that as an opportunity to shame themselves.
I just want to pause you right there so we can run through what you observed, what you inferred, and then what your conclusion was. You observed that you create these collages in order to be inspirational, right? And then you observed also that it's not particularly inspiring. And when you started to think a little more deeply or analyze why you thought this would be inspiring, you came to a couple of conclusions about that, right? By seeing this, it might motivate you. Yeah, probably was one thing. And
the science of vision boards is like, if you put it out there, if you put it up, your subconscious brain will find a way from point A to point B.
So really what we're analyzing and assessing in this case is that assumption.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the assumption that vision boards are effective for this goal. And so you're accruing some data that says otherwise. So now we can start to say, okay, are vision boards effective for you? Not are vision boards effective across the board. I'm sure that they are effective for some people and in some situations, and that's a moving target.
Especially when they don't trigger tremendous shame.
Right. And so then maybe we start the cycle over again and observe, wait a second, I'm getting a lot of shame out of a tool that is supposed to be positively reinforcing. So let's maybe analyze why I'm getting shame out of a tool that I thought was going to positively reinforce me before we get to the action steps. right? Which is where you stopped. So why does a vision board seem to incite shame in you rather than inspiration or motivation?
I'm going to stare at my vision board.
Let's see what happens.
I
can see a Cersei Lannister. Shame. Sorry.
I guess I feel like, so I'm looking at my vision board. I think what'll be actually fun is if I show you my vision board.
Ooh.
I think I can do this.
I want to see your vision board.
All right.
So what's the first thing you observe about the photos that you've chosen? Like if we were to really, what are all these people exhibiting? Like what are some things, emotions that come up? The emotions that made you choose the images. Like why did you pick those images? What did they represent for you?
I wanted to look like a winner.
Okay, so this is what winning looks like.
This is what
in your vision
board.
This
is clearly what winning looks like. Look at that shit. Like,
okay, tell me more about winning.
Okay.
Why does this look like winning?
It kind of looks like you're the kind of person who doesn't let anything stop them.
Okay.
And you see people on top of a freaking rock or mountain, we can assume, and rock climbing and more rock climbing and hiking and what's that weird thing where you're on a board and doing yoga,
paddleboard yoga, stand up yoga.
Paddleboard yoga and weightlifting, and God, there's another surfboard down there. Jesus, I moved away from the ocean
and some badassery that you're
and the emotions that made me choose these images. I was trying to be really careful to choose images where people are mostly doing an activity and not just posing for the camera, because I used to do that a lot. So I thought, well, this is great. They're actually doing an activity. They're not just posing for the camera. We're like, look what my body looks like now,
Are these feelings that you want to feel, or are these feelings that you feel and these images represent it?
These are things that I want to feel. These are not things that I feel.
So these are inspirational or aspirational feeling photos. Great. So when you look at them, the next step is, do they inspire you or do they make you have other feelings?
It's like a mixture of the two. It really is. Part of me feels like, I sometimes will just glance at my board, kind of on accident, like just feel like, oh, okay. I want to go lift some weights now. Yeah. Like, look how badass you look when you're lifting weights. I do find that inspiring, mixed with when I look at some of these images, I'm like, now I'm going to lift weights and I need to look like that. If I don't end up looking like that, then that's not a win. And if you recall, those women are really fucking lean to the point where I'm like, that is not probably a sustainable thing that they're doing.
For some people, it is, because it's easier. Like they're just either predisposed for that or they've had habits that have generated that over a really long period of time.
Well, some people can F off.
But also, some of those people are definitely pushing the extremes of what their body is willing and capable of doing.
Okay, I'm just going to call bullshit on the first thing, because I'm like, they're posing for a fitness magazine. There is no way that they showed up like, just me living my normal life. I showed up like just sustainably got to this point. No, there's no way that they didn't like hardcore extra diet, extra hard, and extra not drink water, extra hard to get there.
These are the feelings that are elicited and the stories that come up for you when you choose an image that is really far away from where you're at right now or where you perceive you're at right now. So one thing I might suggest in this case is like, what images could you replace in that vision board to make it inspiring and not a shame spiral instead? I have a radical idea. I think you're gonna
what image pictures of me doing those things? Is that because I'm like, no, it's not inspiring. I'm not inspired by myself.
And I think that's where this goes. Because this is how you know we're getting to something here.
I feel like that would, okay.
Because it's this reconciling of this ideal that you have and this person that you are. And no matter what the actual distance between these two things is, your perceived distance is too big for you to overcome. And while it remains that way, it doesn't matter what picture you put up there, you're going to decide that it's unachievable. And so, how do we work on that internal narrative that you've got rather than use a vision board for it? Because I actually think I would like the vision boards to maybe just get politely covered like a respectful piece of art that needs a rest. Because I think the reality is, until that self-talk and that recognition of your own achievements and progress is a deep part of you, you're going to look at those images and go the other direction. Because I think it's the thing we keep talking about. We've talked about it a couple of weeks in a row. It's this intrinsic feeling of self, I don't know, it's like such a douchey word, but like self-mastery and ownership of your beliefs and your goals and your priorities.
Yeah.
And it's not that you don't have them, but you don't own them as yours. And I think until that's the case, this kind of externalized imagery puts you backwards. So to speak, which is why when I knew the response was going to be, I'm not putting pictures of myself doing shit up there. But I think that's the whole point. Like, you fundamentally are not seeing yourself as this person that you're aspiring to, even though you are doing those things. I mean, maybe you're not stand-up paddleboarding because you live in North Carolina. At some point, the action has to overtake the aspiration. Yeah. And you're doing that. I don't want that to sound like you're not doing it. Overtake the aspiration.
Has to overtake the aspiration.
And that doesn't mean you have to jump on a paddleboard and do a handstand. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
I didn't want to paddleboard that much. I just thought, like, oh, that's a cool. I guess to me, I'm like, oh, what it really elicits is like these people, the people on the vision board look objectively, undeniably fit. Like, you wouldn't look at them and not be like, well, you're fit. You really work out.
Which is a totally different thing, right? But this is the power of using these analytical tools that we have to really refine down, is this really the thing I'm focused on? Because now we've spent a little bit of time kind of talking it over and analyzing it and communicating about it. And you're like, well, actually, that was my first assumption about why I picked these photos. But actually, there's also this thing. Like, it's not either or, but it's both. Like, and both. Also this, right?
Yeah.
So we can repeat that.
Okay.
And we can say, okay, so if this is what fitness looks like, what actions can you be taking that will lead you to that place? Or are you already there? So if you were to superimpose yourself on that image, how would it be different? Whether or not you've actually done all of these activities doesn't matter. This is a thought experiment, right? Like, put yourself on that paddleboard in the sunset, being like, whatever yoga position she's in. Could you physically do that?
Yes. I could physically do everything except for that one-handed grab on a cliff, probably.
One-handed grab on a cliff. Yeah, don't do
that.
Well,
there's someone rock climbing with one arm on the freaking cliff in like a bikini.
Oh, because rock climbing happens in a bikini, like a lot.
Why do we have that?
So can you put yourself in those positions, literally? Like, can you imagine yourself and visualize yourself being there?
Yes.
Great. So the next step from there is, how do you take one step closer to doing something like that? Because that's what that vision board is about. When I see that vision board, maybe it's not the individual activities on there that you find aspirational, but you want to be out in the world doing things. That's everything in that board says to me. Like, I want to be out doing things and experiencing things.
Can I say something that is not surprising to you at all? I want to.
You hate going outside.
No.
Or like out in the world.
Going outside. I hate people.
Exactly. I didn't want to say I hate people.
I love people individually. I hate them as a group, in a crowd, anything where there's more than 5 people. I can't do that. I want to feel like I look the way I want to look while doing these activities.
So do you think you should wait until you look a certain way to go do those activities? Or do you think doing those activities makes you look a certain way?
I don't know.
Damn it.
I don't know. No, it's no, I struggle because I believe it's the latter. I believe it's like, or is it? Or is this just bullshit magazine bullshit where people are fucking starving themselves in order to look this certain way, or they're doing things. You know what I need? I've been thinking a lot, and this would probably go right in line with our critical thinking stuff, right? So precision nutrition has that little infographic where it's like what it takes to get to this
The
look,
cost
this
of being lean.
the cost of being lean.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking a lot lately with my critical thinking skills, except I really lack understanding of this. I think I have this image in my head, and I'm like, well, what does it actually take to get there? And would you actually be willing to do it? And I'm like, well, I don't know because I don't know what it takes.
Okay. That's actually a really good place to start because I think there's a big disconnect between what we see in images as marketing materials,
Mm-hmm.
what we can effectuate as change in our actual lives, and just how much time and energy goes into looking a very specific way versus being able to competently do a certain series of things. And so those things are not all mutually exclusive, or they're not all tied together. Like, you don't have to look like those people in those images to do those things. And you don't have to look that way to feel good doing them. But if you think you can't do them until you look that way, then you'll never start. Right? Does that make sense? So it sort of becomes like it's like a catch-22. And so
I'll still do the things. Like I still want to do the things, but I'm not just doing the things out of pure love for doing the things, except for maybe hiking.
Okay. But I think hiking is a great anchor point, because even when we go back, and I know this is in the podcast archives somewhere, we discussed you taking up hiking. And the first things that came up were a lot of different points of resistance, right? It's going to be wet. And
I was scared of ticks.
And I was scared of ticks.
Let's be real. I was really freaking scared of ticks.
Right. And
that was like my biggest thing.
So when we start to look at addressing the fear, the underlying fear of starting the new habits, we can one by one play excuse whack-a-mole, right? And eliminate those by either moving barriers or by setting up support systems, or by in some way affecting your environment in a way that makes these things more achievable. And so this is the infographic, The Cost of Being Lean, and Precision Nutrition has had this out forever, and they iterate it periodically. And there's a newer version of it than this now at this point. But I think it particularly speaks to fitness-oriented things and not activity-oriented things. And I think there's some strengths there, but there are also some drawbacks. And what that is like, if you're coming at this from an aesthetic appearance perspective, then this is the perfect infographic for you, because it really gives you the full spectrum of what you need to do in order to achieve these looks. And it's a very specific set of things to look this way. I'm also going to say that looking this way is not necessarily the most well-balanced lifestyle that you're going to create for yourself. So this is filtered through the lens of the fitness industry, right? And in the fitness industry, we like measurable body outcomes. We want circumference measurements, body fat percentages, scale weight, muscle strength, whatever. These are the things we're looking at. And so when you frame it through that lens, then yes, it makes sense to have an objective metric such as body fat. But even within that, we could argue that it's highly, highly subjective body fat, unless you're doing one of the full body scans.
Yeah.
Right. But any kind of gym measurement that they're going to take on site without an actual pod you stuff yourself in and get completely fully scanned is not super accurate. It's more of a progress marker.
Yeah.
But what we're looking at here, and it's even in the wording, athletes at this level of body fat, right? Again, we're not talking about optimal health outcomes. We're talking about athletic performance outcomes. So again, if you're looking at, I want to go out and do things and live a healthy life and have fun, you may not need to care about your body fat percentage. If you don't have an athletic performance goal, your body fat percentage may not be the most important metric for you. However, in this scenario, if we follow the logic that they're trying to lay out, because they're just using a framework to explain behavior changes you can implement that will take you along the spectrum of lower to higher body fat. So, and this is one of the greatest infographics, I think, because it was one of the first things that ever really presented this as a behavior model and not as a just like, fitness is just a thing you have to go and do, and any amount of it will get you as far as you want, right? So the understanding here is that on the left, these are the benefits and trade-offs of being at this body fat percentage, which I think is really good, right? Because it doesn't require a lot of thought or effort on your nutrition or your training habits. It means you can go for a walk with your friends, you can go for a run, you can not do those things. It really doesn't require any effort or planning on that domain of your life. Like maybe you're busy doing other things and this can't be a focus for you right now. It's not a judgment that this is bad. This is just saying you're not putting a ton of time and energy and effort into your diet and nutrition and training. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, if you're not taking care of your body from this perspective, you will end up with poor health markers. Your energy levels might be low. You are risking metabolic syndrome, and you may need some medications, right? And this is where the line between fitness and health converge, okay? As a perpetual motion machine, if you're not adequately taking care of your physical person, you're going to have maintenance issues, right?
Yeah.
So at this level, if we're only looking at body fat as the measurement, then this holds true, right? If you're sedentary and you don't move a lot, and you eat mostly highly processed foods, and you eat very quickly, and your portions are large, right? And you do no exercise of any kind, and you don't eat a lot of whole foods, and you don't get a lot of sleep. I mean, these are not surprising things.
Yeah.
These fall back on empirical data, right? So these are not assumptions we need to test. We know these things to be true. We know that poor health outcomes result from being sedentary and eating a lot of highly processed foods. If you want to start moving along the continuum, and we go towards slightly healthier, you'll notice on the left where we get back towards habits, right? Or I'm sorry, benefits and trade-offs. We're talking more about, okay, I start to feel a little bit better. I sleep a little bit better. Exercise isn't a huge chore. It doesn't feel like the biggest event in my day because I have to put a bunch of extra energy into getting myself to move. But it does require a little bit more thought and planning. Right. And It says under there, it says you'll look good, but not super lean. So in today's speak, this could potentially be viewed as problematic, but also let's be realistic and let's also address the fact that looking healthy is important to most people, especially people of reproductive age.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is a massive driver of human behavior. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say you should just never care about what you look like. It's completely okay to care about what you look like and to put a reasonable amount of effort into that. And that's what this is saying. Right.
Yeah.
So when it says some thought and planning, it means maybe you need a little bit of structured exercise, right? On the right, it says 3 to 5 times a week, find any activity you enjoy at any intensity level. We're not asking you to follow a training protocol. We're not saying you have to have a periodized, optimized plan with, deload weeks and structured squat progressions. Like this is not where we're at to achieve this level of health. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to commit some time and energy to taking care of your body in order to reap those results.
Yeah.
Right. And you look at the habits that they're asking you to start to include. These are the places that we start with the nutrition coaching as we talk about adequate nutrient intake. We talk about eating slowly and mindfully, stopping at 80% full. And it only says you have to do this at 60% of your meals, which means 40% of the time, if you're stuffed and rolling out of your dinner chair onto the couch, you can still maintain a reasonably healthy lifestyle here. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, the more you implement these habits and you work on this process, the better the benefits you're going to be. And so if we scroll down again to the next category, right? And they're still using the terminology athletes at this, right? So now you start to see them mention things like Olympic canoe and kayak athletes, professional baseball players, professional softball players. If we look at this, we're looking at, these are still activities that are done at a competitive level. Okay. And that's great. And some people, that's a fantastic place to be because it still doesn't require all of your time. It requires some of your time and energy and some rules around eating and exercise, but it's not all encompassing, right? So again, it's fairly easy to maintain. Energy levels continue to improve, probably be able to reduce or eliminate many medications. Great. This is great. Okay. So if this is the easiest place to be, in the sense of I put in a moderate amount of effort for a moderate amount of benefit, then this is something most people can strive to do. Now we're going to start getting into the leaner end of the spectrum. We're still considering these body fat percentages healthy, but now we're starting to see Olympic swimmers. So if you have a picture in your mind of what somebody who would swim in the Olympics looks like, they're pretty lean, right? Now we're starting to talk about focused training efforts, focused meal planning, 90% compliance with slowly and satisfied at your meals, right? Like that means you only get 1 or 2 meals a week where you're not eating slowly and satisfied. And this is to maintain your optimal body fat level. But this requires planning and scheduling and structure. And now we're starting to get into the place where these people are still like higher end on the scale of health promoting behaviors, but they're not necessarily what you would see in some of the fitness magazines, right? Real athletes still look like real people.
It's hard for me to see from these like drawings. I'm like, what is this? It would be great to see an example of people they think are this body fat percentage.
Well,
like
I mean, you can Google it. Let's go with built lean, that first one. Let's just see what they've got.
Built lean. I don't know why I said that's so douchey. I don't know. I'm sorry. No, I'm not gonna comment on people.
So there's a lot of different things here, right? With
sometimes I look at these and I pick out which body I would be happy in.
That's a whole other conversation.
Honest. Sometimes I look at is that fucked up, Kris?
No, I mean, it's not. I think it's definitely indicative of the culture that we exist in because the fact that your happiness is linked to what your body looks like says a lot about the environment that you exist in.
Oh, shit.
But I mean, everybody does right now. This is not, I'm not saying that as though it's like, oh no, Liz, you're super different and weird. I'm saying that like, that's how things have been presented to us for a long time. Right. Yeah. So if you look at the body fat percentages, what I find really interesting here is that down at the very bottom, we have 10 to 12, 15 to 17, 22, 20 to 22. And then the middle range, it doesn't like, these are not laid out well.
There we go. Now it's laid out.
Okay. That makes more sense, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, I don't know what's wrong with the other person.
That's okay. And I mean, if we look at the two absolute extremes,
yeah,
right, of each of those two photos, what you're seeing are just that, the extremes. Just as much as maybe being 40% or 50% body fat as the upper scale for women and men is unhealthy potentially, so is being 3 to 4% or 10 to 12%. And I just want to point out immediately the large difference in bottom range body fat for women versus bottom range body fat for men. Okay, like 3 to 4% is, I would say, technically achievable for men. And 10 to 12%, like we can spend a whole nother hour talking about the health trade-offs for women at 10 to 12% body fat. And there's this very small category of women who can happily, healthily exist at this body fat percentage, but it isn't the majority.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we look at those pictures, when we look at 3 to 4% or 10 to 12% for men and women, respectively, like this is what it looks like to spend almost all of your time focused on your diet and your training. And when I mean all of your time, I mean all of your time. So it's more than a full-time job. It's socially restrictive. It has the reward potentially being cast in fitness modeling jobs or magazine covers. But that's it. Right? Those are the rewards of that. And if we go back to the cost of being lean for a moment, let's start talking about the other end of the extreme because, okay, these illustrations are not super graphic, not as graphic as those actual photos were. But now we're starting to see, okay, we go down one more level because this is 20 to 22%, which, is reasonably average if you engage in a moderate amount of healthful activities.
Let me look back at what 20 to 22%. So it's this.
Yeah. But I would even say the 25 to 30%, they're not showing a massive difference there.
No.
Right? And I would argue that there's a lot of different body types in these photos as well.
I know, because I'm like, this 30%, very hourglass.
What I want everybody to notice is at the bottom here, we're back to unhealthy. Let's recognize that this is not the pinnacle of health. This is an extreme set of protocols designed to elicit an extreme result.
Yeah.
This is not where most people stay for their entire life either. Even those people you see in magazines, they don't maintain this indefinitely. Very, very few people maintain this low of a body percent fat. Maintain this low of a body fat percentage for years and years on end with no break. It's not how it works, but it is what you're sold. So you look at that picture on your wall, you look at your vision board, and in your mind, that person looks like that all year round. In every activity they do, whether they're shopping or they're swimming or they're having dinner with their friends, they just look that ripped all the time. That's not reality. So the only thing I can do here is speak to my personal experience with this range of body fat percentages and my experience and my limited experience in fitness modeling and fitness media. And what I can tell you is that a lot of the people who are cast in fitness things are not highly fit people. They're just models. Okay? So what we're holding up previously as models for what strength looks like, it's not what strength looks like. That's what thinness looks like. And so if you start to actually Google like strong women, what you're going to see is not teeny tiny limbs and long, lean legs. You're going to see big, thick thighs and chicks with some serious muscle. This is what strength looks like. And confounding the two things is really, really like counterproductive. All right, this is great. So let's click through some of these. Okay, so this, I mean, if we were to peg these women, really inappropriately peg these women at a certain body fat percentage, they're not at the lowest end. I don't see 6 defined abs on each of these women. And honestly, I don't want to as a performance coach and as like a nutrition coach for pro athletes. If I see too many abs, I'm going to tell you to eat because you need that fuel to fuel your activity. If you don't have it, you're not going to perform at your peak because those people whose number one goal is aesthetics, they don't have to execute massive physical endurance feats. Okay. They stand on a stage and they turn around and you take pictures of them. And that's the goal. That's the goal. And that's fine. But that's not what really strong performance athletes look like. Those are not the same thing. And we need to separate that assumption that the leaner you are, the better it is. It's not always true. There is a threshold beyond which getting leaner decreases your performance. It depends on what kind of sport you're doing, how lean you should get, and how much body fat you should still carry. And
you know what I want to point out? Okay, there's this thing. Do you remember the Titan Games that The Rock did?
No.
There was an athlete I saw on there, and I believe she won, but she looked very different when she was actually at her peak physical awesomeness on this show. Very different than like her Instagram account.
That's a great image right there where that stopped. Look at the girl on the left and look at the girl on the right. Totally different body types. Which one do you think is physically stronger?
I saw this. I was watching some episodes of this, eventually lost interest. And I saw this woman, Charity Witt, and I was like, oh my God, she's such a badass. But also I noticed, I was like, well, she's not what you would look at as like a super lean athlete. And that really excited me. And that made me feel really happy. And then I started following her on Instagram and noticed how incredibly different and leaner, much, much leaner she looked on Instagram. In her Instagram photos than when she did training to be the absolute best and at her absolute strongest. And she's kind of just killing it. And she just like fucking picks up this boulder and she's all like, I got it. And she just drags it as another woman.
Okay.
Like,
and look at it.
Look
This
at
is
that.
physics, okay? This is physics at work. This is mass moves mass, right? You can't escape that. And so the idea that and there's nothing wrong with the other girl either. We're comparing performance aspects here. She physically does not weigh as much as that boulder. So she's proportionally having to be stronger to move that same mass. Okay. So what is your goal with it? Right. Because if you can't have all the things at the same time, and this is again where the critical thinking comes in. And we're going through this process. We're gathering data right now, right? We're looking at all these different elements and saying, well, is that what fit really looks like? What does fit really look like if it's not that? What kind of fit do I want to be if there's multiple kinds? And what does it look like if I achieve that? And so it's like, if your goal is to be strong, like really strong, you don't need to be really lean. You need to have some mass, right?
But what I found was interesting was looking at it. So I got really inspired and happy because I was like, oh my God, she crushed it, and finally seeing like a female athlete recognized for her athletic prowess.
Yes.
And not being like crazy lean and not being crazy lean. And so I started following her on Instagram and was very not calling her out or anything, but because it's like the freaking game, very, very dismayed by how different she looked on Instagram once she kind of got once she got a lot of press from this episode.
Right. But what do you think she did in the interim? Again, let's really peel back the curtain. And you can't for a second think that nobody said something to her that she should be leaner. And she was beautiful as she was.
Yeah.
Right. There you go. There's the before and after right there on the left. And they're calling her a plus sized model. I don't have time to get angry enough about that. But I want you to look at all of these different images in the background, right? She's not super thin. She's not thin. She's strong. She has muscle mass that she carefully cultivates. Okay. Like and I have so many women who come in and say, well, I don't want to get bulky. Like the amount of work and focused effort and nutrition that goes into maintaining that level of muscle mass on a female frame is intense. You cannot look like this by accident unless you are very, very blessed.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important to remember that on Instagram, you can play with all of your angles and present your body in whatever angle you want to minimize or maximize whatever angle you want. Okay. Yeah. Like no photo of somebody where you think, wow, that person's pick a body part is so amazing is by accident.
Yeah.
And so there's that too. You have to understand the nature of the beast. If we take this back to the critical thinking skills and we take it back to where you're having some sort of cognitive dissociation is this idea of like, this is what healthy and strong and all of these things that I want to be look like. And I want to be those things. But that's not actually what they look like in real life. So now you have a paradigm for what your body is trying to achieve.
And so how, using our critical thinking skills, I'm trying to reconcile what I want, like the image in my head, with what I'm actually willing to do to get to point B. What the hell does that even look like for me? And what would that actually take? I honestly feel completely at a loss because the only thing I've ever known is 1,200 calories.
Right. And I think
that's it.
It's such a mashup of misinformation and mismatched protocols for goals that it can be really hard to go through it. And so we look at it from fundamental skills, right? And we've talked about this before, but fundamental skills are level 1, are you taking in adequate nutrients and adequate calories for whatever activity and lifestyle you're leading? If not, that's the place to start, and getting really consistent with taking in regular, adequate nutrition, getting regular, adequate sleep, and getting regular, adequate movement. That's it right there. And that's the meat and potatoes of any other program you're going to build. And if you're skipping any of those things, you're going to be tweaking and turning dials and changing things that aren't going to have a real impact because you don't have a baseline that you can start from. So
And
It's
I feel like
under
I've got that baseline
yeah.
in a pretty consistent way now.
You definitely have a demonstrable track record of I'm eating this many portions of protein a day reasonably regularly. I'm getting X amount of vegetables a day reasonably regularly. I'm getting X amount of movement a week in these formats regularly. Like that's where we're at. Maybe we need to more clearly go back through and refine what does adequate mean? Because that's the next thing. Like I might think 5 servings of vegetables is adequate, and you might think 10 servings of vegetables is adequate. And which one is right? Well, there's probably some research we can look at that says there's a pretty good range in here that's solidly usable. And then we can experiment with you personally and see what works. Going back through and refining that process a couple of times of refining your foundations, making sure they're really, really consistent is the only way to then start making changes that are going to show you the outcomes that you want. How good are you at getting challenging exercise every week?
I think pretty good. I'll say this, I always like compare my exercise, especially my weightlifting, to those times when you and I were in the gym. And there are times when I'm all like, okay, I think I'm pretty good. And you're like, okay, on to our next exercise. And I was like, shit, okay. So I
Yeah.
always compare and I really feel like I struggle to push myself as hard as you used to push me.
Well, and that's a place where maybe more information is necessary, right? Maybe some data gathering is necessary, because if that's a genuine question, then I mean, I can't just sit here and be like, of course it's hard enough, Liz. I'm sure you're doing absolutely I don't know that. And I don't see the data to tell me for sure that this is adequate. And so this is what trainers
And
do
I
for
felt
you.
comfortable and safe when I was with you because I'm all like, Kris is probably not going to push me to the point of injury, as where I have injured myself alone before. So I get really freaked out about that.
So what it sounds like to me is that in order to make the next step of progress in this department, you might need to hire a coach locally, because that's what you're saying. I know you don't want somebody else, but at the same time, like you need more than one person a lot of the time. You need a team of people kind of working on these different aspects. And that's why we have these different domains within fitness and stuff. But it's about finding a good coach.
Even though we've talked about that, I'm so scared that someone's going to trigger me. Be like, well, if you ever want to look the way you want to look, you're going to do this, not be such a lazy person or something. And then I'm going to be like,
so this whole idea of being triggered, like I think I'm going to bring it back to this intrinsic value you have in what you're doing and what you're working on, because at the end of the day, what somebody else says to you doesn't have to change your behavior, right? They can say you suck and that you're never going to get to your goals and all of that. But they're not you, and they don't control your daily actions. And what looks like success for them may have nothing to do with what looks like success for you.
Yeah,
so,
but when you're in a super vulnerable state and someone does that, it can be incredibly damaging, which is what I worry about.
Well, how do you get yourself to a state of confidence with movement so that when you put yourself in a situation to be moving with somebody else, you don't feel inadequate in that environment?
I'm having this random memory when I was doing MMA, and I joined this like Santa Monica MMA gym thing group, whatever. And I remember the coach, I was like fighting someone else, and the coach like kind of was looking at me, and afterward he's like, you're a lot more athletic than you think or something. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, what, like, is that a dig on me and the way I look? Like, or can you tell I'm really self-conscious? Like, I don't know what that means.
I got to collect my thoughts for a second on that, because that internal critic of yours, no matter what somebody says to you, from what place they're saying it, if you can find a way to take it as an insult, and you do, then it doesn't matter what the other person's intentions are, right? So like you could spin that comment 1,000 different ways, right? But what I heard when you said that was he observed you and thought, she's got a lot of talent, but she doesn't feel confident. And so his comment was designed, and I don't know, I wasn't there, right? But his comment was designed to say like, you're doing great, and like have some more faith in yourself. And yet somehow still, even in that environment, your brain said, is he judging me? Is it about how big I am or how small I am or what I look like doing this movement or whether I should be here or not? And as long as those questions are continuing to roll around in your head for you, no environment is going to feel safe.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So that's the place to do the work. Like, how do you create a safe place where somebody's comment can't derail your internal motivation?
I feel like I've been working on that forever and I still can't quite get there.
Yeah. So let's see, what tools can we apply here? Because I think it comes right back around to what we're talking about with this vision board. Because even with the photos you have specifically chosen to be inspiring for yourself, that internal critic of yours comes back and says, no, you're not good enough for this.
Yeah. And also my critic comes and I'm like, do I really want to sacrifice what I'd have to get to there? And then if I did, could I even do that? Like,
But that's the same
and it
voice.
feels
That's the
very
same voice of,
exhausting.
yeah, but that's the same voice of self-sabotage that tells you you can't do it. That's the same voice, right? And if we were to name that voice, like, what kind of name could we give it? Like a person name or an animal name or whatever.
Inner douchebag. I don't know.
Your inner douchebag. Great. Okay. So step one is recognize when your inner douchebag is talking and learn to say, okay, douchebag, like, that's cool. Thanks for the info, but I don't have to believe that. I don't have to believe that. I can act otherwise. Like, you can say all those douchey things that you want to me. Fine. But I don't have to listen. Because until you can shut that inner douchebag off, the external douchebaggery that comes your way is going to penetrate very deeply, because the internal douchebag will be like, see, I heard that. Haha, see, I told you. You got to learn to silence that guy. And by distancing himself from you, by giving it a name, or the other voice that's saying that a name, allows you to start separating yourself from that.
Okay.
So that might be the thing to try for this week, is to, like, now that we have a name, oh, hi, inner douchebag, welcome back. There you are again. Catch yourself in these self-deprecating moments, because this is what's sabotaging your ability to get out and actually do more things that you want to be doing.
Really, it's taking away any joy I get from it. Like, I still go out and do it, but I'm just like spending the entire time like, you really need to crack down on your diet. Man, if you just crack down on your how long is it going to take you to crack down on your diet? Like, the
Okay, inner
entire time.
douchebag. I think he should be named Craig.
Craig. I knew one Craig once, and he was an absolute fucking douchebag.
Sorry, Craigs out there who aren't
Absolute.
douchebags, but like, that's the name that came to mind for me. So you'd be
Craig.
like, oh, hi,
Shut
Craig.
Craig.
Shut up, Craig. Right. And being able to create just that distance and laugh at it, because you have to recognize at this point that it is preventing you from taking more steps. Because if it's unenjoyable and the inner douchebag shows up and ruins your time, how likely are you to go do it again?
I'm not looking forward to doing it again. I'll do it again, but I'm not looking forward.
Well, how many times are you going to go do something that you don't look forward to doing?
It depends on how much I enjoy punishing myself.
Right, exactly. So how much do you enjoy punishing yourself?
A lot. Actually, I'm a Virgo. Yes, I like it a lot.
But less than you used to, and your tolerance for it is decreasing because you avoid the situations, right? Rather than showing up and constantly getting pummeled, you slowly but surely back away. And so, like, I think recognizing Craig, the inner douchebag, is the goal. Like, how many times is he popping up into your head telling you you can't? How many times is he being like, people are going to judge you? Oh, did you hear what that person said about you? Guess what that means? Okay, Craig, shut up.
I love it. Okay.
Okay. Because I think this is the next really big hurdle that's preventing, because you've managed, despite Craig douching around in your head for a while, you've still managed to improve your eating. You've managed to take up regular exercise. You've moved across the country to improve your environment. You've made massive, massive steps. But he's still in there douching it up, telling you suck when you don't suck. And you have demonstrable evidence that that's the case. Right? You can literally write on a piece of paper actions, concrete actions you have regularly taken that defy Craig's douchey comments. So he needs to fuck off.
He really does.
Like, stop hanging out with him. He's a drag. I'm sitting here saying this stuff like, oh, you've got an inner Craig. My dad is the voice in my head, because my dad was horrifically verbally destructive all the time. I can't remember a single time he said something positive to me. And so that's my internal critic. So for me, I have to recognize when that's not supporting me. because he never did. And once I was able to recognize that that's where that inner voice for me came from, where that negative critic person came from, I'm able to dismiss it a lot better. I'm able to say, oh, shut up. Like, I don't need you in my head right now. Like, you're not going to help me. I don't need to stay in this place. And then I'm not great at it. I mean, like, I could tell you 6 different opportunities I had today where my inner critic showed up and was like, you suck.
Yesterday on my hike, I was just trying, like, okay, just try to think like anything, enjoy the surrounding, like beauty, like anything else. And it's like I couldn't stop thinking, like, how many more hikes do you have to go on till you look the way you want to look, you know? Do you really have to eat dinner tonight? I don't know if you do. What if you just stop eating dinner? I bet things will change for you.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've given Craig the stage for a really long time. He's not going to quiet down quickly. It's just a repetitive practice, right? Let's go back to the cow path analogy, right? Craig's got a pretty well-trodden path to your attention. It's the biggest path in your mind right now. So he's going to be there, and you don't have to act on what he says. And I think that's step 1, right? Is gamifying this a little bit by giving him a name and by giving it a slightly ridiculous, aggressive response. Shut up, Craig, right? That's step 1, right? Because that's a interruption in the habit loop. Shut up, Craig is your habit loop interruption, right? This is a habit. This is a thought pattern. Interrupt it. You're not going to just be like, oh, shut up, Craig. And he's going to be like, fine, I'll go away. That's not how he's going to behave, right? Nope. He's going to be like, what? You want me to shut up? I'm not going to shut up. I'm going to keep going. And the more you gamify it and you externalize it, the easier it's going to be to repeat that. But it's going to be practice, and it's going to take time. It's not like
so when it won't shut up, what are some tactics that are healthy and safe to do? Like, I started listening to my audiobook.
Yeah, for sure. So distraction, right? Think about it this way. Like, you've got some idiot on a plane who won't stop talking to you. Put your earphones in. He can keep talking.
Or poison them.
Or poison them.
I mean, give them a sleeping pill.
Right. Obviously, that's what you meant.
But that's what I meant. Not kill them because they irritate you. That's not normal.
But look at what a strong response you're having to somebody invading your mental space like that. Like, you want to poison the person that is poisoning your mind. Like, that's a pretty hardcore, big metaphor for how you feel about this situation and how much emotion is dedicated to that. So although that seems like a strong response, you probably feel like giving Craig a strong response at this point. You want him desperately to go away. But the best way to get him to go away is ignoring it and not acting on it and interrupting it by putting an audiobook in. Change your perspective. If you can't actively change your perspective, do something else. You're not failing at this. You're still here. You're showing up. You're making changes and you're taking actions. Just because you haven't sorted it all out, it's a shut up, Craig moment. Shut up, Craig. What are you doing? How are you helping me? Right? You can, the more you can personify this as away from you, the more distance you're going to be able to create and the more you're going to have power to silence him. As long as you feel like this is you doing this to you and owning this way, it's going to be really hard to separate that stuff. So it's creating that initial separation. Name it. Shut up, Craig.
Okay.